So I throw my boy a high, fast one, just a little on the inside, and pow! Out of the park it goes. A four-bagger in anybody's ballpark. But the next thing I know, up walks the owner of this car, Mr. Taylor, with the ball in his hand. And he wants to talk to me about that cracked windshield.
I'll bet Tom got a little pink in the face, Tech.
Oh, I don't know, Red. Maybe Tom's glad it happened after all.
What makes you say that, Tech?
Well, we were going to tell Red about the new windshield weather strips anyway, along with the change in the cooling system. Now we can still do it, but we'll fix Mr. Taylor's car at the same time.
Yeah, Red. How about helping me replace the cracked windshield glass on this car?
Well, sure, but I'm not really up to date on how to handle these new jobs.
Well, that's why you've been elected. So first off, let's cover up the cowl and instrument panel to keep from scratching the finish. Then, you take out the division bar garnish molding and joint cover screws so you can lift off the molding and the top and bottom joint covers. After that, you remove the lower and upper garnish molding screws on the cracked glass side. Now that lets you take off the lower and upper moldings in that order. Now while you're still inside the car, take off the 3 hex nuts along the lower weather strips. They hold the lower outside finish molding and center clip in place. Besides those, you remove the 4 hex head nuts that hold the division bar in place.
Now Tom can show you how to do the outside part of this glass removal job, Red.
Right. First of all, Red, you lift off the center clip and the division bar. Then, you remove the metal screw from the corner trim cap. Now, you can lift off the lower section of outside finish molding. At this point, you can leave the upper outside molding in its groove.
Groove? Where's there any groove?
Here's that molding groove, Red. And notice the retainer pressed into a groove in the weather strip. That retainer is what makes the weather strip fit tight against the body metal and the glass. That weather strip retainer is on the inside of the Plymouth windshield, so when you pull the retainer out, the weather strip loses its grip on the body metal. That's why the glass and weather strip both come out on the Plymouth. But I'm getting ahead of my story. Here's how you get that retainer out. Inside the car, you use a Phillips head screwdriver to pry the ends of the retainer up out of the weather strip channel. Then, you pull out all the sections of the lower retainer as far as the division bar. Next, you start at the lower outside corner and pull out the upper retainer as far as the division bar.
I got you, Tom.
Good. Now, when I push the glass out at the upper outside corner, both the weather strip and the glass will start to come out.
Easy now. How's she coming?
Well, now, as soon as the glass and weather strip are out, you can take out the upper finish molding section. All you do to remove it is push it out of the molding groove in the weather strip.
Just push 'em up, Tommy. I get you.
Good. Now you start rolling the weather strip off the broken glass section and pull the glass out.
Pretty slick. I hope putting a new glass in is just as easy.
Well, Red, installing new glass isn't tough if you know how. You better let Tom give you a hand.
Yeah, Red, we'd better take her step by step. To begin with, you start the new glass into the division channel by holding the glass at an angle. Now, you work the weather strip over the top and bottom edges of the glass. Make sure that the lower corner of the weather strip fits over the corner of the glass. Then, you finish working the weather strip over the top edge and down around the curved corner of the glass to the bottom.
I savvy, Tom. When that glass is in there, I suppose you start working the upper section of the finish molding into the weather strip, starting at the lower outside corner.
That's right. And following that, you get ready to put the windshield section back in the car. So, get yourself a few feet of 3/16" cord, the kind that's used on Venetian blinds. You install this cord around the body metal channel of the weather strip. Have about 6 inches of each end of the string sticking out at the top and bottom of the division bar on the inside of the car. Now, as I push on the bottom edge of the glass, you pull the string along the lower edge from the division bar to the corner.
All right, Tom.
Fine. Now pull the string from the lower corner up that side and across to the top of the division bar.
I can see you're a string puller from way back, Red. And you see what happens? The cord really acts like a shoehorn.
Yeah, Tech, she sure do. What happens next, Tom?
Why, I'll thump on the glass all the way around to make sure it's seated in the weather strip and over the body metal. Everything looks okay, Red. Now, you use a wetting agent, like the no-rinse stuff the wife uses on the dishes. Wipe some of it on the weather strip retainer to make it slippery. But don't use a strong soap. It might hurt the finish. Then, using this special installing tool, insert the retainer strip. Start from the division bar and go right across the bottom to the outer corner.
Don't worry about the retainer being in short pieces. You can still use it if you get all the pieces back in. Just don't leave any gaps, or there's apt to be a leak.
Yeah, Red, if you have to use a new piece, cut it a little longer than you need. That'll let you pack it firmly in the groove. Next, you install the upper weather strip retainer, starting at the division bar, working across the top and down the side to the corner. Now, Red, you gotta be careful to wipe off any soapy water that has leaked out on the weather strip, glass, or instrument panel. It might damage the finish. So use a wet cloth and be mighty sure you got it all cleaned off.
Yep, and after the cleanup job, you'll be all ready to put back the lower outside finish molding and trim cap, Red. Tom will tell you how that's handled.
Sure thing, Tech. Pick up the lower outside finish molding, Red, and install it with the notched end toward the division bar. Just push the studs right through the holes in the weather strip. Incidentally, if you've used a new retainer, the attaching studs will try to push it out of the groove. So you snip the retainer right at the studs and push the ends back into the retainer channel. If you're using the old sections, be sure you get them back in like they were before. After that, install the washers and tighten the nuts down very gently. Otherwise, you might break the glass.
Yeah, Red. And on the outside end of the lower finish molding, install the corner trim cap. It just slides over the molding. Then run down the metal screw to hold the cap in place.
Okay, fellas. What's next?
Why, Red, you next install the outside division bar and just snug down the retaining nuts very lightly. Over-tightening those can also crack the glass.
I see, Tom. I suppose you install the trim clip at the bottom of the division bar?
Right. Then you get inside to install and tighten the nut that holds the center clip. Okay. Now you install the garnish moldings in this order. First, the upper molding and joint cover at the top of the division bar. Second, the lower garnish molding and the joint cover at the bottom of the division bar. Don't tighten the garnish molding screws too much, or you'll close up the defroster openings. Finally, you install the division bar garnish molding.
I understand that routine now, Tom. It's not as tough as it looks. I suppose that windshield glass job is handled the same way on the Dodge, DeSoto, and Chrysler right down the line.
You're supposing wrong, my boy. But let's turn this record over, and then Tom can explain where our other cars' windshield weather strips are different.
Here's what Tech means, Red. On DeSoto and Chrysler cars, you'll find the same type of windshield weather strip. But you'll notice that it's installed with the retainer on the outside.
Wait a minute. Does that mean the retainer strip is under the outside finish molding?
Sure, Red. So when you're removing a DeSoto or Chrysler glass, you don't have to take the garnish moldings off. You just loosen up the attaching screws.
Yeah, Tech, and there are a few other special angles to keep in mind.
Well, then I think you'd better give me a quick run-through so as I won't get those differences mixed up.
Okay. Here's how you do it. First, you remove the division bar assembly, loosen the garnish moldings, and take the outside finish moldings off. Remember to take the upper finish molding off first, starting at the lower outside corner and working toward the division bar. Then, push the lower section of molding up to take it out. That lower molding just snaps into a groove in the weather strip.
I catch. And I suppose you pry up the retainer with a Phillips head screwdriver, then pull the strip out slowly so as not to break it.
Check. You're on the beam, my boy.
Yeah, Tech. Then you push the glass out of the weather strip.
Just a second, Tom. How come the weather strip doesn't come out with the glass?
Well, here's the answer, Red. The retainer groove being on the outside lets the glass channel open up easier. In other words, when you get around to installing the glass, you put the glass into the weather strip after the weather strip is installed on the body metal.
Yeah, I see it now. But exactly how do you put the glass in?
Well, you use this wedge-shaped fiber tool I made to work the lip of the weather strip over the edge of the glass. Always start the glass well into the lower outer corner of the weather strip and work across the bottom edge until it's seated over to the division bar. Then work from the lower outside corner upward, around the curve, and over to the division bar.
Here's a handy tip, Red. Get an inside man to use the other end of the fiber tool to rub up and down on the division bar. Then you can bump the glass into the channel with your hand.
And that reminds me, never use a mallet on the windshield glass, because it's laminated and might crack along the edges.
Okay, boss. No mallets.
Well, you button up the job by soaping the retainer and installing it with the special tool. Start at the division bar and go across to the bottom corner.
Why do you do the bottom first?
Good question, Red. The weight of the glass makes it seat well down in the lower channel of the weather strip. So if you install the upper retainer strip first, the glass would be squeezed partway out of the upper glass channel of the weather strip.
Mm-hmm. That way there might be a water leak along the top.
That's right. And now you know all about windshield weather strips on the Plymouth, DeSoto, and Chrysler.
Yeah, but what are you holding out about the Dodge?
Nothing, Red. Servicing the Dodge windshield is similar to servicing the DeSoto and Chrysler. But the Dodge weather strip is slightly different.
Different? But how?
Well, this piece of Dodge weather strip I cut out shows you how the retainer is hinged to the main weather strip.
I get it. The weather strip and retainer are all one piece.
That's the idea. So when you want to remove the glass, loosen the garnish moldings and take off the outside finish moldings. Then, on the inside, thump the glass with the heel of your hand. This will free up the retainer.
Yeah, and here's an important point. This type of retainer is cut at the top and bottom of the division bar. That's where you start to pry the retainer out of its groove.
Right. And once you get the retainer end up, hold a compressed air nozzle at the slot and give the retainer a shot of air. That will pop the retainer out of its channel. Blow it out from the lower center to the corner. Then, from top center across and down the side to the same corner.
I see. You gotta give it 2 shots of air.
Yeah, Red. Here's something you gotta watch. That hinge is thinner than the rest of the weather strip, so don't go digging that retainer out with a screwdriver.
Tech's right, Red. If you do damage the retainer, you'll have to replace the complete windshield weather strip.
Okay, Tom. I'll watch out for that.
Fine. Now, once you've got the retainer popped out, you push the glass out just the same as you do on the DeSoto and Chrysler.
That takes care of out. Now, how about putting a glass in?
Well, from that point on, Red, everything's the same until you come to locking the retainer into place.
What's so special about that?
Just this. You soap the retainer. Then, at the lower outside corner, press down with the rounded end of the fiber tool and run it toward the division bar to the vertical cut.
Incidentally, Red, that cut acts as a breather. It lets the air out of the retainer so it'll stay put when you press it in.
Right, Tech. Now, to finish locking the glass, all you have to do is run the fiber tool from the corner up around the curve and across the top to push the retainer back in the weather strip.
Okay, Tom. I think I've got all the windshield info down pat. These new weather strips sure are a real improvement. You don't have to use any sealer when you're all finished.
Yeah, Red. I'd say that just about wraps up the windshield story.
Say, Tech, when this job started, you said you were going to talk about cooling systems. How about it?
Whoops. Almost forgot. Tom, give Red the dope on that new internal bypass.
Sure. Red, you'll remember that some Plymouth and Dodge models used to have an external bypass cooling system. Under that setup, during engine warm-up, the flow of water in the cooling system is from the cylinder head into the outlet elbow, into the top of the water pump, and back into the engine.
Yeah, that's right. Now what happens?
Well, with the internal constant bypass used on the new model Plymouth and Dodge cars, the flow is from the cylinder head through a special passage in the front of the block and into the water pump. From the pump, of course, the water circulates back through the engine by way of the water distributor tube. So you've got a new cylinder head, gasket, block, and water pump.
Ho-ho! New parts and new servicing angles, eh?
Well, in a way, yes. But if you're wondering about whether you can use new parts on an earlier type engine, the answer is you can.
That, my friend, I want to know more about.
Well, Red, a new water pump assembly package is available. So you'll be able to adapt the new pump to a 1950 or to an earlier model car.
That's good news, Tom.
Another thing, Red. A 1951 model cylinder head will work on an earlier model engine if you use a 1951 head gasket. Here's why. This new gasket seals off the bypass hole in the new head and prevents leaks. Actually, Red, you can use the new gasket on an earlier model engine block and cylinder head, too. The new gasket will stick out a little at the front, but that doesn't make any difference.
Sure. But there's one thing you gotta keep in mind. Eh, Tom?
Yeah. Red, don't install an earlier type water pump, gasket, or head on a 1951 model engine, because they just won't work.
Okay, Tom. I'll remember that.
In this reference book, Red, you'll find a description of the new bypass system and how to service it, as well as some good tips on windshield servicing.
Swell, Tech. I'll look it over first chance I get. I'm sure obliged to you and Tom for the latest word on windshield weather strips and the changes in the cooling system.
Don't mention it, Red. I needed your help on that cracked windshield anyway.
Yeah, Red. And if I couldn't help to bring you fellas any new information every month, why, I'd be out of a job.